Well, I appreciate the opportunity to join you this afternoon. As previous speakers have said, yes, these lights are very bright. I'll see if we can gauge some reactions here. My opportunity, I think, in taking this time this afternoon to jump back in right after lunch, it's a little bit difficult, but farming is difficult. Working with farmers and working on different sustainability initiatives is not an easy thing. And so where I'm trying to come from in providing the perspectives today are some of those guiding influences, some of those underlying themes, the landscape, the infrastructure that's in place that might affect whether or not an initiative is successful or ultimately fails. This is coming from a sustainability initiative perspective, but this can also be thought of from a market development or product commercialization standpoint as well, some of those underlying themes. And so I'll cover 3 different topic areas in the discussion here over the next few minutes. And the first one would be just covering very briefly the agricultural landscape. Where are we at today? What are farmers undergoing today? Then moving into what are the farmer data collection systems? How are farmers utilizing information to make decisions on farm? And then looking beyond that to key influences and opportunities to leverage in helping farmers move forward. So from that perspective, I don't think anyone's disillusioned to the fact that our agricultural economy across the United States is under incredible stress. These are just 3 headlines I pulled recently coming out of popular ag media, looking at the stress that farmers are undergoing financially year over year. Over the last several years, there's been an incredible amount of capital eroded due to low commodity prices across the board. If I'm looking specifically at row crop production, this carries forward to beef production, poultry, pork, other livestock production systems. But it's not just the farms. It's also looking at the infrastructure around the farms, the research and development pipelines on a public side, and especially on the private side, having the capital to be able to move very effectively and efficiently in product development. As another way to look at this, we can summarize at a national level the farm debt. And so I like to look at both of these figures, and they get a little bit complex, but if we look to the left first, we can analyze farm debt from the 1970s until just last year. And what we see in looking at the farm debt is that we see the highest point of debt for real estate, non-real estate debt taken on by farms since the 1970s and 80s, which were another point of incredible crisis for farming today, for farming across the United States, much less globally. So we're at a similar point to where we've been 30, 40 years ago. As another way to look at that, we could look at farmer profits. Do our farm businesses profitable year over year? And this is a shorter time window, looking from 2006 until 2018, and we see farm profits increase and then come back down to the lowest point in about 12 or 13 years. So this is, again, thinking to the individual farmers and their ability to take on new initiatives, to spend time in looking beyond the marketing of their grain or operating, working with their labor or their data management. It's working within this incredible leverage against farmers financially. Beyond that, we know there are other influences and other pressures on agriculture, such as public pressure, policy and regulatory pressures on farming as well. And again, this isn't just farming, this is our food security. We had an incredibly, just a wonderful meal here. We have, just as the speaker said previously, we take it for granted that we can go and get food at any point. But this debt and this leverage against farmers year over year affects the ability for the farmers to remain resilient and in farming year over year if they can't operate and maintain their businesses year over year. So how do we manage through the risk? What are some of the opportunities to look at and manage through the different types of risk farmers have? First, as I think about the risk to an individual farming operation, I think about the different decision points farmers have throughout the year, in which they're taking active steps to manage those risks. And ultimately, this time of year, farmers are at one of the most critical points of the year, especially throughout the row crop and grain production systems throughout the Mississippi River Basin, which comprises about 48 to 50% of our land base in the United States. Right now, farmers are harvesting. We're sitting here in Miami. It's pretty nice weather outside. We're sitting in a conference room, very, very nice climate here. Most of the country is undergoing harvest and under significant delays. And these delays, again, create incredible risks to the farmers' profitability, to our food security in the chains that we have. Fortunately, yields still look good, But again, the economic profitability is definitely a question here. So this time of year, farmers are trying to get the harvest done, and that looks at the yield and profitability. But it's also environmental risk. What does it look like if we, such as if we look earlier in this year, when we had 20 million acres, roughly a fifth of the corn production acres in a prevented plant situation where it was too wet for farmers to get into the field to plant that corn. What does that look like from an environmental perspective? Are we able to utilize different technologies to help manage any nutrients that might have been applied, any crop protection products that might have been applied at that point? And so these decisions mount throughout the year. And ultimately, farmers make about 40 interacting decisions year over year. And every single one of these 40 different decisions has a direct impact or an indirect impact on yield, profitability, environmental risk, and then the social capital not only of that individual farm through institutional knowledge, but the rural communities and the suburban communities around that farm. Most of our, at least from where I come in the Midwest, most of our economies in the Midwest are driven by agriculture. So what does it look like if we remove a set of taxable income for that rural community to support roads and hospitals, schools, bridges? All these things we rely upon are heavily supported through agricultural production in those states. So it's just recognizing these direct connections and indirect connections in managing the risk going forward. So what are farmers doing, again, with these decisions? How are they making decisions? We've heard from several different individuals, and there's a wealth of information on using precision data to help inform and make better decisions over time. And what we've seen is an evolution in farming, even over the last 5 to 10 to 15 years, in utilizing precision data and then trying to bring in novel business management techniques or novel business management strategies to improve production and efficiencies in managing production acres. So where we were in the past is maybe looking at broader zones throughout fields. The figure on the left might be a soil map, it might be a profitability map for an individual field, and we can add in the different layers through many different service providers and precision data providers, and then we can actually get down to incredibly precise zones that could be managed as franchises. So this would be a novel business concept in agriculture to look at individual zones in a field as an individual franchise with its own associated profit and loss statement, income capacity. We can have different sets of environmental risk or associated labor constraints that might be put together in different zoning structures for the fields. So we're trying to bring in this structure from other sectors that could help out agriculture moving forward. And this ultimately, this affects how we provide inputs, allocate those inputs throughout the field, and hopefully have a better return for the farmers year over year, no matter when the commodity prices are high or when commodity prices might be a little bit low. So as I've worked in sustainability initiatives in previous roles, it's thinking about the infrastructure that brings forth not only the understanding of the landscape of agriculture today, but also these management strategies, these different decision points throughout the year that farmers are making, along with the different levels of risk associated with those management decisions and the precision data going forward as well. And like I like to think about it not from an ask perspective, but from an offer perspective. Farmers are asked to do quite a bit already. So as we're working forward with the sustainability initiatives, especially something that might fall out of a commonly known profit area for a farmer, it's thinking about how do we create that tangible return on investment proposition or value capture proposition for that individual farmer to really want to come in, and then how do we make those similar propositions to those around the farmers that create influence for the farmer and the decisions they're making. So this has been covered earlier in previous discussions, that there's intense fragmentation. So as I'm thinking about not only the farms, but also the infrastructure and the support networks around the farms, it's a recognition that agriculture is incredibly fragmented. And many individual farms have different levels of institutional knowledge that put them at different points of receptivity to different initiatives coming onto the farm. whether the farmer has been working a piece of ground for 30, 40 years, or they're coming right out of school. That they may not have a background in agriculture, but they're interested in coming in and developing a farm with a novel business concept. It's just understanding the different spots farmers are at moving forward. And similarly, from a financial perspective, I mentioned the profitability and the debt structure. It's also realizing the operational loan structure that farmers are constrained by across not only the United States, but globally as well. And I could ask who's familiar with operating loans, and I'm guessing there'd be a fair amount of hands going up in relationship for understanding what an operational loan is. But then I could ask the follow-up question is, how many people take out operational loans to be able to go to work today that are tied to your personal assets? Your house, your cars, any bank accounts, any different properties you may have, and putting those properties on the line so that you can operate your business under an incredibly risky set of scenarios. I think we need that perspective when we're going on to an individual farm or working with those around the farm so that we can better understand where they're coming from in their receptivity or lack of receptivity to any programs going forward. And another part of this related to the financial aspects would be thinking about from an influence perspective, does the farmer actually have the ability to make a decision with a piece of ground they're operating on? What I have here on the screen is a map of the rental rates or the percentage of land rented across the United States. And we can look, I'm familiar with the Midwest, we can look at a high degree of rental in the Midwest. So tenants operating lands that they do not own, they may not have the ability to actually make decisions to engage in cost share programs or have the willingness of that landlord to engage in a program, depending on what that looks like and the risk that the landowner may view or perceive in a program going forward as well. And a lot of this comes down to individual relationship management. Many of the rental agreements are handshake agreements, and they're also annual contracts or cash bid situations where year over year that same piece of ground may go up for an auction where the highest bidder would come in and secure that piece of ground. So it's understanding if we're setting up research or setting up a long-term sustainability initiative, that farmer may have the want to join, but they might not have the ability to join based on the relationships that are being managed locally and the different cash lease structures that are in place across the United States as well. Similarly, there are many, this gets very technical, but there are many different interacting factors with soil types, climatic zones across the country. And as I advise different organizations, both on the for-profit side and the not-for-profit side, as to how to deploy sustainability initiatives, some of the information conveyed here, while it can get very technical, it can help improve efficiencies in data collection systems that might be in place. And so what is underlying the maps on the figure is a concept known as technical extrapolation domains, or ultimately what it comes down to is extrapolation power of the data. If you select a location, how many other locations are similar enough to that location, so you could say the results from the first location extend to the second location or the third or the fourth. Basically, how generalizable are the data you're collecting in the system? So if you're targeting an area that has great extensibility to the data, you can get greater efficiencies, and you may not need as many locations covered. It also can influence whether or not individual farmers would see a likelihood of success in a program with the ability to extend those data. And then I'll wrap up here just with the last minute and a half or so. This comes back to those decision points and timing, understanding when the farmers and those, again, influencing farmers have the capacity to have discussions. When are they making those key decision points throughout the year? And this varies by cropping system, geography, different types of soil conditions, different types of operational loan systems. Understanding what is driving those very local decisions to operate the farms are incredibly important. And actually, I'm going to try to jump to the last slide in this as well. But with those different timing perspectives, it's also understanding when these individuals that provide influence to the farms are having those discussion points with the farms. So these are results coming from a rural poll out of Iowa as to summarize who has the greatest influence to individual farmers. And if you look to the bottom of the graph, we see that both seed dealers and ag retailers have incredible influence over farmers. So this is an industry perspective. That's not a bad perspective. There's incredible infrastructure across the United States in private research and development that in many discussions isn't brought to the forefront. I historically have been parts of these networks, and the research and development dollars are incredible, especially compared to what we publicly put into research and development, say through USDA or otherwise. So, but it's not saying one's better than the other. There are definitely pros and cons and kind of a yin and yang to the public and private development processes, but it's just recognizing that this vast infrastructure is there and it can be brought forward to farms to help influence their decisions. So these seed dealers and these retailers that bring a lot of valuable information to farmers, it's understanding what motivates them, what drives them to bring influence and information to the farms, and when are they bringing that information to the farms. So if we're coming out with a new program, when do these folks need it so that they can prepare themselves and educate themselves so that they can then convey the information through their channels to the farmers. It might be 2 to 3 months in advance of when a farmer might be making a decision. So it's putting together that pipeline of timelines, backing up based on who's making what decision, who's influencing individual decisions. Similarly, with a university or other farmers, you might have to back that time scale up even more. You might need much more advanced timing to prepare for a program going forward. So I will wrap up here, but I really appreciate the time and opportunity to come speak with you today about a few concepts very quickly, and I would love to follow up further via individual conversations afterwards.